Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are your guides into the source material that you really need to understand history's biggest moments, extracting the key insights and, well, the knowledge that defines everything.
And today we are immersing ourselves in a period of just incredible pressure, a moment so intense it threatened to unravel everything that had been built over, more than 2 decades.
That's right. We are exploring the transition immediately following the passing of the Prophet Muhammad. Peace and blessings be upon him.
And this moment is, well, it's arguably the most fragile, the most existentially challenging moment in the history of the early Muslim community, the Ummah.
The central figure, the charismatic leader, the source of spiritual guidance, political authority, everything was suddenly gone.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission today is very specific. We're analyzing this immediate crisis, but through the lens of leadership. We want to understand the exact mechanisms, the words, the actions of Abu Bakr As-Siddiq, may God be pleased with him, that stabilized the entire emotional and political landscape.
Yeah, and for this, we're relying on a pretty deep stack of historical accounts. We've got narratives from the early chroniclers, modern analyses, including excerpts from Crisis and Caliphate, and also the very detailed work, Hazrat Abu Bakr As-Siddiq, by Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir.
What all these sources really emphasize is that this was never just a political handover.
No, not at all. It was a seismic shift of faith, of trust, of destiny, and it required a level of spiritual clarity that is, frankly, hard to imagine.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll look at the terrifying, immediate emotional reaction of the Ummah. Then, the crucial steps taken to turn that paralyzing confusion into, well, functional unity.
And then the specific path that led to Abu Bakr's acceptance as leader, and finally, the principles he laid down on day one for what Islamic governance should be.
For you, the learner, this is so much more than history. It's a universal case study.
It really is. This deep dive is about understanding how true, enduring leadership emerges under maximum, you could say, existential pressure. And it really defines what a servant leader is.
The key question, looking at all this material, is this. What specific qualities are required to anchor an entire civilization when its foundational figure is just gone? And how did Abu Bakr's lifetime of subtle preparation suddenly make him the only choice?
That's the core of it.
Okay, let's start with the scene itself. We need to transport ourselves back to Medina. Try to imagine the sheer terror, the spiritual vacuum. For years, the Prophet had been the physical manifestation of the divine connection.
He was everything. The recipient of revelation, the arbitrator in disputes, the military leader, the spiritual teacher, literally everything.
And the sources, they paint this truly agonizing picture of the shockwave that hit the moment the news was confirmed. It wasn't just sadness.
No, it was a city collapsing into total disarray. The depth of the confusion, it really reveals just how reliant the community was on his physical presence.
Can you give us some of those specific reactions? I mean, how did people even begin to process this kind of loss?
Well, the accounts are incredibly detailed and frankly disturbing. Some of the most senior companions, men of immense stature, they simply fainted. Their bodies just couldn't cope with the mental and spiritual load. It was a physical shutdown.
Right.
Others, men who had been in every battle, every political intrigue, they were just rendered completely silent, paralyzed by the vacuum. And then there was this raw emotional outpouring that really threatened to devolve into mass hysteria. People crying uncontrollably, just unable to rationalize what was happening.
And the most iconic, the most visible example of this immediate psychological collapse involves a man known for his unflinching strength, Umar ibn al-Khattab.
Right, Umar, who would go on to be the second caliph, a giant of history. He was utterly undone.
And this is such a crucial detail, isn't it? Because it illustrates the immediate threat to the community's stability.
Absolutely. Umar, the man of iron will, the one everyone looked to for firmness, was just consumed by denial. He was drawing a line in the sand, emotionally and physically.
What exactly did he say? And what was the emotional basis for this declaration?
He stood up, drew his sword, and declared to anyone who would listen, "Whoever says Muhammad has passed away, I will strike him. He has only gone to meet his Lord, as Musa did."
So he's comparing it to Moses on Mount Sinai.
Exactly. This denial was rooted in a profound love, but also, a deep theological confusion. He believed the prophet's mission couldn't possibly be finished yet. He couldn't accept that God would let his final messenger die before the work was done.
So he was effectively confusing the mortality of the man with the immortality of the message.
Precisely. And when the strongest voice in the community starts threatening violence based on that denial, you realize the community desperately, desperately needed an anchor. And fast.
They didn't just need comfort.
No, not at all. The need was for an immediate return to spiritual and physical reality. They needed clarity, calmness, firmness, and leadership that was grounded not in the heat of emotion, but in enduring divine truth.
Because if they stayed in that state of denial,
They would never accept a successor. The whole project would stall. They needed a leader who could guide them through the grief and back to the core tenets of their faith.
and that clarity came from Abu Bakr. The sources say he was actually outside Medina when the news broke.
Yes. And his actions upon arrival are the very definition of moving from private, profound faith to immediate, necessary public duty.
He didn't just rush out to the crowds, did he?
No. He internalized the situation first. The sources detail his quiet wisdom. He entered Aisha's room, went straight to where the prophet's body lay, and he performed this private ritual of acceptance.
What did he do?
He uncovered the face of his lifelong friend, his leader. He kissed his blessed forehead, and he spoke these deeply moving words, but just to himself, privately. You were beautiful in life and beautiful in death.
That moment, processing his own immense grief, that must have been the key to his composure later. He had to anchor himself first.
I think so, yes. That transition from the deeply personal, silent farewell to immediately stepping into the public eye to stabilize a reeling nation, it shows an incredible capacity to compartmentalize and prioritize.
He wasn't immune to the grief.
Not at all. But he understood the existential clock was ticking faster for the Ummah than for his personal sorrow. He transformed his own acceptance into a weapon against the collective chaos.
So let's analyze the historic speech that followed, because this is the linchpin of the entire peaceful transition. He walked out to the crowd, which was still listening to Umar's impassioned, grief-stricken threats.
And he just cut straight through the emotional storm with pure theological logic.
His approach was a masterclass in crisis communication.
And spiritual redirection. He didn't argue with Umar directly. He spoke over the chaos, addressing the fundamental belief system of everyone there. His core message was simple but profound, separating devotion to the messenger from devotion to the message.
What was that powerful declaration he made?
He declared, "O people, whoever worships Muhammad, let him know that Muhammad has passed away. But whoever worships Allah, Allah is ever living and never dies."
That is just profound theological clarity. It instantly shifts the entire weight of their faith.
It forces them to confront the true object of their worship. If your faith is based on a man, it just died. If it's based on God, it's eternal.
I think that's what makes this a deep dive.
And
It wasn't just a simple statement, it was an organizational shift. It ensured the survival of the institution of Islam beyond the life of its founder.
Exactly. But he didn't stop there. He immediately provided the proof, the undeniable evidence,
The scriptural citation.
the crucial scriptural citation. He recited from the Quran from chapter 3, verse 144. Muhammad is only a messenger. Messengers passed before him.
And the sources confirmed that this verse, which, had been revealed years earlier but was just forgotten in the agony of grief, it hit the community with the force of a fresh revelation.
It absolutely did. And the immediacy of the effect on Umar is the barometer of the speech's success. The sources quote Umar directly. He admits the physical impact of that truth.
What does he say?
He said, "When I heard this verse, my legs could no longer hold me. I knew the prophet had passed away."
Wow. The physical collapse of the community's strongest man upon hearing the truth, that signifies the end of the emotional crisis.
And the spiritual resurrection of the entire Ummah, it's the moment they return to reality.
That is just so powerful. He shows that Abu Bakr's wisdom, his ability to recall and deploy scripture at the perfect moment, were the only tools that could anchor them back to reality.
It turned a crisis of faith into the ultimate affirmation of the message's permanence.
And it validated the very first principle of his leadership.
In times of ultimate crisis, the truth, grounded in foundational principles, is the ultimate stabilizer. Not coercion, not charisma, but truth.
Okay, so the immediate emotional and spiritual collapse is averted. Abu Bakr stabilized the city, theologically. But now the political pressure ramps up dramatically.
While the mourning rituals were essential, the question of who leads this nascent state was urgent. If they didn't decide quickly, the entire Islamic movement risked fragmentation.
And the location for this political confrontation was a place called Saqifa.
Specifically, the courtyard of the Bani Sayyid clan. And you have to remember, this wasn't a formal assembly. It was an urgent, almost panicked negotiation happening immediately in the chaotic shadow of the funeral preparations.
And the sources stress that the urgency came from the Ansar, the helpers, the residents of Medina.
Right, and you can understand their position. They had risked everything to shelter and support the Prophet and the early Muslims. They felt, with some justification, that they had the greatest local claim to leadership.
Their urgency was understandable from a sort of localized political perspective, right?
Completely. They felt that with the Prophet gone, control might revert to the powerful clans of Mecca, and they worried about losing influence in their own city.
So what was their initial proposal?
Their proposal was to choose a leader from among themselves, they said. Let there be a commander from us and a commander from you, the Muhajirun.
A commander from each group. Dual leadership. And that would have been catastrophic, wouldn't it?
Absolutely catastrophic. The community had just achieved unity under a single central figure. Splitting the leadership would have immediately divided the nascent state along tribal and geographic lines.
It would have invited civil war.
And made it incredibly vulnerable to external attacks. You have to remember the movement included all these recently converted, very fickle tribes across the Arabian Peninsula. They would only respond to unified, recognizable authority. Dual leadership was a non-starter for them.
So the stakes were unity versus fragmentation. And this is where Abu Bakr, along with Umar and Abu Ubaidah, they arrived to confront the situation. How did Abu Bakr intervene? What was his strategy?
He was brilliant. He didn't dismiss the Ansar's claim of merit or sacrifice. He actually validated their historical importance. But then he shifted the discussion from local merit to geopolitical necessity.
So he reframed the whole problem.
Exactly. He recognized that for the new state to function externally, to secure its borders and expand its influence, it needed legitimacy that transcended the city of Medina.
Unpack his core geopolitical reasoning for us. Why did he insist that leadership had to remain with the Quraysh, the Prophet's tribe from Mecca?
He stated it very clearly. Leadership should be among the Quraysh, for they are accepted by all Arabs. And this wasn't about tribal favoritism. This was pure realpolitik.
In the context of 7th century Arabia.
In that context, tribal alliances were everything. The Quraysh were the most respected, most politically networked, and most widely accepted tribe across the entire peninsula. If a leader came from an internal Madnan tribe, the Ansar, all those powerful, independent Bedouin tribes outside the city would likely refuse to submit. They'd see it as an internal squabble.
So a Quraysh leader offered immediate universal recognition.
And the stability required to fight off external threats. It was about survival.
That context is just vital. He was securing the external borders by leveraging existing Arabian political structures, even while promoting a message that was fundamentally anti-tribal. It was a calculated compromise.
Precisely. And the genius of his approach was what he did next. Having made the case for the principle of Qurayshi leadership, he immediately proved that his argument was about the institution, not about his own personal ambition.
This is the moment of radical self-effacement, where he offers the leadership to others.
Yes. Instead of demanding the caliphate for himself, he grasped the hands of two other key, highly respected figures, Umar ibn Khattab and Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, and he offered them to the assembly. He said, choose one of these two men.
That willingness to actively cede power, to risk walking away from the highest office he was so uniquely positioned for, it's staggering.
It forced the entire conversation away from his ego and back onto the objective needs of the state.
It was a tactical masterstroke of humility, really.
Yeah, it was. By refusing to grasp the office, he inadvertently made himself the only acceptable candidate. He proved his priority was the community's stability, not his own gain. If he was willing to step aside for two honorable men, the people can trust that if he did take the role, it would only be out of necessity.
And the response from Umar here is the final, crucial turning point. Umar, who had been the most distraught in part 1, now becomes the ultimate stabilizer in part 2.
His decision was immediate and decisive. He had just witnessed Abu Bakr's spiritual clarity. He had listened to the geopolitical arguments. And he just cut through all the remaining debate at Saqifa with one powerful, validating statement.
What did he say?
He said, no one deserves this leadership more than you, O Abu Bakr. You are the best among us. You are the Prophet's companion in the cave.
Bringing up the cave companion, the reference to the hijrah, the migration, that's key. It's not just a political endorsement.
It's a spiritual and historical one. It was a non-contestable precedent, a reminder that their association had divine recognition mentioned in the Quran itself.
And what happened then?
The sources say Umar then immediately pledged his allegiance, the bay'ah, to Abu Bakr. This single decisive action secured the unity of the community. Once Umar, the exemplar of strength, made the pledge. The Ansar, recognizing the legitimacy and the overriding need for cohesion, followed suit.
And just like that, the immediate crisis of political succession was averted.
Yes, and it established the mechanism of the Caliphate through consultation, validation, and ultimately unifying action.
We have to move beyond the immediate crisis now and look at the foundation upon which Abu Bakr's leadership actually stood. The sources make a really compelling case that his selection wasn't an accident, but the only logical conclusion based on a lifetime of established trust and precedent.
Exactly. This proves the choice was based on a pattern of behavior and established favor, not just, some clever political maneuvering at Saqafa. We've distilled 5 specific precedents that really cemented his position.
And these 5 points form the structural integrity of his leadership claim.
They confirm that his caliphate was a natural continuation of the Prophet's authority, not a break from it.
Okay, let's start with the first and most public precedent: leading the congregational prayers during the Prophet's final illness.
This is immensely significant. In the early community, leading the salat, the prayer, was synonymous with spiritual and community command.
It wasn't just a symbolic role.
Not at all. By delegating this duty to Abu Bakr, the Prophet was establishing a public, visible, and functional handover of authority. It meant he was fit to lead not just politically, but spiritually, a crucial requirement for the leader of this new community. This was the strongest possible signal of succession, and everyone in Medina witnessed it.
Okay, the second reason. This one speaks to his lifelong loyalty and sacrifice. He was the Prophet's closest companion.
And the sources underline this with a specific statement from the Prophet himself. No one has favored me with his wealth more than Abu Bakr.
And that's not just about friendship.
No, it refers to the immense financial and moral support he provided during the grueling early days in Mecca, when the movement was at its most vulnerable. He sacrificed everything for the cause. His commitment spanned decades, making his dedication completely unquestionable.
The third point is one of temporal priority. He was the first man to accept Islam.
This just confirms his immediate understanding and continuous support for the message from day one. He was the earliest foundation stone of the community, not a latecomer. This continuous dedication provided an essential layer of legitimacy. He understood the core mission and the sacrifices required better than anyone else.
The fourth point takes us back to that perilous journey we mentioned at Saqafa.
His companionship during the Hijrah, the emigration from Mecca to Medina.
And this is critical because, as Umar highlighted, his presence with the Prophet during this highly vulnerable, divinely guided journey is specifically immortalized in the Quran.
Yes, the second of 2 in the cave. To have your companionship honored in Scripture, that elevates your status beyond mere political choice. It implies a perceived divine endorsement. It sets him apart from all other contenders.
And finally, the fifth reason, the one that had just saved the entire community from breaking down, his unmatched wisdom and calmness.
This is the psychological bedrock. As he proved in the immediate aftermath of the passing, he was the ultimate anchor in moments of chaos. When faced with an existential crisis, the community will naturally gravitate toward the individual who remains calm, clear-headed, and grounded in core principles.
So he had already passed the ultimate stress test.
With flying colors.
So if we synthesize all of this, the transition to the caliphate was less a sudden political vote and more a realization. A collective realization that every spiritual, emotional, and political precedent pointed logically and undeniably to one single person.
Exactly. It was the culmination of a life dedicated to selfless service, trust, and proximity to the message. It wasn't a successful political campaign based on ambition. The office found the man because the community couldn't afford to look anywhere else.
Now that the selection is secured, we pivot from the process to the mandate. Abu Bakr's iconic first speech as Caliph is one of the most powerful inaugural addresses in history.
Oh, absolutely. What he promised the people, how he set the ethical and governmental standard for the caliphate, it's just remarkable.
The speech immediately rejects the pomp and power you'd associate with a traditional monarchy.
It begins with this profound declaration of radical humility that instantly sets the tone for his entire rule.
He opens by saying, "O people, I have been appointed over you, but I am not the best among you." Why is that opening sentence so critical?
It's an immediate public check on power. It states that the authority he holds is a burden of responsibility given to him by the people. It's not a divine right. It's not an inherited kingship. It rejects the arrogance of absolute authority from the very first minute.
And he didn't wait long to establish accountability, did he? Not just for the people, but for himself.
That's right. He set up a direct, public feedback mechanism. He created an expectation of transparency and cooperation. If I do right, help me. If I do wrong, correct me.
That's incredible. It makes the entire community partners in governance.
It gives them a mandated right of duty, even to hold their leader accountable. This is a foundational principle of ethical governance that resonates even in modern democratic discourse.
He then defined the moral parameters of his administration.
Distilling the foundational principles of his rule into two crystal-clear maxims. Truth is a trust. Falsehood is betrayal.
What does that mean in practice?
It means every policy, every judgment, every interaction of his government was to be measured against the standard of absolute integrity. Any deviation from the truth by the governing body was to be considered a treasonous act against the people.
And perhaps the most radical statement, especially considering the societal structure of 7th century Arabia, was his promise of justice for the marginalized. This established a revolutionary social equity model.
This is the practical core of his mandate. In a highly tribal, stratified society where the weak were constantly exploited or unprotected, he declared, "The weak among you will be strong with me until I give them their rights, and the strong among you will be weak with me until I take the rights from them."
That's a total reversal of the power dynamic. The power of the state was explicitly declared to be a protective shield for those who lacked natural influence.
It elevated social equity to a primary function of the state. He wasn't promising charity, he was guaranteeing rights. This mandate demonstrated that the Caliphate's function was not to amass wealth or power, but to serve justice, and specifically to empower the da'if, the weak or the marginalized.
It's the highest expression of servant leadership.
Uh,
So this first speech became the blueprint. Humility at the top, justice is the core function, accountability built into the structure, and transparency in all dealings. It defined the ideal caliphate before a single law had even been passed.
Exactly.
All right, now we have to fulfill our promise to you, the learner, because these detailed historical accounts are so far from being just dusty facts. They are critical, actionable lessons for contemporary decision-making.
That's right. They're applicable whether you are leading a corporation, a nonprofit, or even just navigating a complex personal crisis.
Okay, let's unpack this. We witnessed 5 distinct phases in Abu Bakr's transition, from the emotional collapse to establishing governance. How do those historical phases translate into universal leadership principles for today?
We can extract 5 core, enduring lessons that are directly applicable to modern leadership challenges.
First, let's go back to that scene in Medina, where everyone else was breaking down.
Right. Lesson 1. Leadership requires profound emotional strength and clarity. Abu Bakr demonstrated the ability to process overwhelming personal grief privately and then step forward and deliver an objective, foundational truth that stabilized the entire organization.
So for a modern leader
must possess the ability to remain anchored and composed during, a black swan event or an unexpected organizational crisis. You have to provide the psychological center when the ecosystem is shaking. Never confuse love for the departed vision with the permanence of the core mission.
Second, the intense, high-stakes political drama at Saqifa. That teaches us about organizational cohesion.
Lesson 2. Leadership means prioritizing unity over ego or ambition. At Saqifa, Abu Bakr prevented the organization from splitting along factional lines, Muhajirun versus Ansar, by prioritizing the greater good.
He offered the leadership to others.
He did. A true leader today must be willing to delegate or even step aside to ensure the cohesion of the team, especially when internal division threatens the core mission. And his argument for the Quraysh, based on external stability, shows that sometimes tough compromises on internal factors are necessary to secure external survival.
Okay, third, let's focus on that incredible opening line of his inaugural speech. I am not the best among you.
Lesson 3. Leadership demands radical humility and accountability. The source material shows that legitimate power must be conferred upon the leader based on merit and character, not seized by force. Humility is the greatest safeguard against the corruption of power.
And in the modern context?
It translates directly to servant leadership, constantly soliciting feedback, accepting correction if I do wrong, correct me, and ensuring that power is used on behalf of the team, not for personal gain or prestige.
Fourth, his use of the Quranic verse to ground the Ummah back in reality.
Lesson 4. Leadership means prioritizing truth and the mission above personality. Abu Bakr's first act was not political, it was theological. He ensured the community understood that the organization's enduring truth, The message could survive the departure of any single irreplaceable figure.
And modern organizations often fall into that trap, don't they?
All the time. The trap of charismatic leadership, confusing a founder's personal appeal with the enduring mission. True leadership ensures the foundational truth can sustain itself, independent of who is currently at the helm.
And finally, his promise to uplift the weak, the Da'if.
Lesson 5. Leadership is fundamentally service and requires a commitment to social equity. His governance model was defined by using the strength of the state to empower the marginalized, to reverse the social paradigm.
So in any functional organization today,
Leadership must be viewed as a duty to serve and protect the most vulnerable or least powerful members. You have to ensure that justice and equity are prioritized over the interests of the already powerful. That's how you build loyalty from the bottom up.
that entire model, humility, clarity, unity, and service emerging in the harshest of transitions, is just profoundly relevant.
Absolutely.
And here's where it gets really interesting. His leadership wasn't just stabilizing, it defined the entire ethical framework for what was become one of history's largest and longest-lasting empires.
That's it. The transition under Abu Bakr didn't just maintain the status quo, it crystallized the principles of governance that ensured the community would endure. He took a moment of existential, internal crisis and transformed it into a clear, unified mandate for accountability and integrity for centuries to follow.
What a deep dive into crisis management and leadership emergence. The transition to the Caliphate was, as we've seen, one of the greatest existential tests in Islamic history. And it was passed by Abu Bakr As-Siddiq with an incredible blend of spiritual courage, unshakable faith, profound political wisdom, and this unity-building humility.
The sources unanimously conclude that he proved definitively that the best leaders emerge and are recognized in the hardest moments. Those moments when the institution requires an anchor who can point back to the original forgotten truth.
He was truly the necessary man for that necessary moment.
He was.
So for you, the learner, here is a final thought to mull over that builds on the drama of Saqifa.
Consider this. How much does a leader's ability to cede power, to actively and convincingly offer the top position to others, as Abu Bakr did when he presented Umar and Abu Ubaidah, how much does that paradoxically solidify their own claim to power in the eyes of the people?
So does the rejection of ego make the acceptance of power inevitable?
Exactly, because the people realize there's a lack of self-interest. It's a fascinating question about power.
A truly fantastic thought to consider regarding the nature of authority and credibility. Our sources have now set the stage perfectly for the tumultuous first years of the Caliphate. The leadership structure is in place, but the external threats are just mounting.
That's right. Next time, we move into the immediate governance challenges that followed this stabilization. We'll be confronting the immediate external and internal threats to the nascent Islamic State and solidifying the internal faith.
Join us for the next deep dive, Episode 8, where we explore the early challenges faced by the first caliph, focusing on the emergence of false prophets and the monumental, critical task of preserving the Quran.
We look forward to exploring those critical steps with you then.